And now,
no, we're just kidding.
Quiet.
We're just kidding. Last time it was all quiet. This time we're going to have some noise. So, most important thing, please can somebody who can hear us actually just put in the chat, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh, and you can do it in the chat, or you can do it in Slack in the DevOps for actually either, if you can hear us anywhere.
Okay, we're getting people saying they can hear us.
Hey, let's do it.
And they can see Rob's flashing beard as well.
Excellent. It's Christmas.
Alrighty.
You've
Let's
even
go.
got a nice beard comment already. I mean, already.
All right. Well, it's not really a beard that you can miss on the best of occasions, and then today. So just before we start, there was one question. Somebody saying, "What's the length of the webinar?" The invite says 1.5 hours, but GoToMeeting says 3.
Whoa! No, 1.5.
So yeah, 1.5 hours, right?
1.5. Yeah.
Okay.
3 hours. We might be able to talk for 3 hours, but I didn't pack a lunch.
Oh, well, that's the cool thing about this. We can make lunch during the 3 hours. This is a whole immersive session.
But only blender-based foods for reasons that will be revealed.
Oh man,
It's a tie-in.
Okay. This is going to be the best webinar ever. Alrighty, g'day everyone. Welcome to the reboot of the DevOps virtual group from past. Your leaders are Gary Bugsley, myself Hamish in the middle there, and Rob Sill. Unfortunately, Gary had some stuff pop up with his family, so he couldn't make it today. So thoughts go out to you, Gary. Take care, mate. A little bit of community news before we get into the main meat of the webinar. Pass is doing a great thing with hashtags out on Twitter with hashtag Pass Holiday Games. So each weekday until December 21st, so I think that's a couple of days, they're going to post a new fun challenge on Twitter and give away a daily prize. So please check that out and follow Pass on Twitter at twitter.com/SQLPass or at SQLPass. And yeah, the board of directors has been chosen. The results are in. Congratulations to Roberto Francesca, Laurie Edwards, and Jennifer Moser for winning seats to serve on the 2019-2020 Pass board. So congratulations. Right, upcoming virtual webinars. There are a couple coming up in the next couple of days. Obviously, this one happening right now on December 19th. The Global Hebrew Virtual Group is doing advanced data security for your SQL estate with Ronit Rega. Our good friend and current presenter today, Kendra Little, is doing a session for women in technology on January 3rd. About Get Inspired, celebrate the careers of 3 DevOps heroes. That'll be awesome to see. And yeah, coming up in January 8th, DBA Fundamentals, Erin Stellato will be talking about plan stability through plan forcing. And then the next 2 weeks later, Brent Ozar will be talking on free downloads for powerful SQL Server management. And the Global Hebrew virtual group on January 24th will be doing SQL Azure DB options with Penny Crochet. Yeah, so there's a whole heap of past virtual groups. Please check them out. Please join them and learn. SQL Saturdays, obviously it's Christmas period, so not too many. There's 3, Nashville on January 12th, Linz up in Europe there on January 18th, and Malaysia on January 26th. The cool thing is, in February, they're really going to kick off, especially in New Zealand, where I'm from. So yeah, visit SQLSaturday.com to register for an event near you. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Kendra. We're very lucky to have Kendra present to us today from Redgate, and the session is Can This Team Succeed at DevOps? At which point I'll go to the agenda. And Kendra basically...
There we go. I was like, It didn't go to the agenda. There it is.
No, this isn't my first webinar. But yeah, just let me know when you want me to click and stuff, and yeah, we'll be all good.
It's totally automated. This is actually Hamish says he's clicking, but this is actually already pre-programmed, so you won't even be able to tell. It's amazing how this is going to work. So today I am giving a presentation that is a panel discussion. So really, this is a way of me not doing all the work, but I think it's going to be a really, really fun panel. So what we're going to do is we are going to introduce ourselves, and we are going to encourage you to join the community Slack. So while we are talking, if you aren't yet in the SQL Server community Slack, here's how to do it. Go over to dbdatools.io/Slack, request an invite there. It's all automated. It'll send you an invite, and you can use that to get into the Slack. Then once you're into Slack, click on the word channels to the left, join the DevOps channel. So you'll get to see a copy of this slide again soon, but go ahead and start the process now so that you get in there. The bonus to this will be that not just for this webcast, but if you want to ask questions about DevOps after this, hey, you've got a whole community of people who you can do that to. So I see people joining the DevOps channel now. That means we can go on to the next slide and introduce ourselves. So yeah, maybe for the intros, what should we focus on? Maybe we should each talk about how we first got interested in DevOps. Is that a fun one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I see how this is going. Alrighty. Totally automated.
Yeah, this is a fully optimized solution.
Who wants to go first?
I think you should give it first on the slide.
Okay. Oh man. Okay, how did I get into DevOps? And apologies for zooming in and out. I'll go back to the proper one. Yeah, so I was really sick of getting up at 3 in the morning doing manual deploys that I didn't really know what the heck was going on. And I got sick of fighting with developers, not literally, but in a figurative way. My journey was more about, look, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so joined forces with tester and developer. And if you've ever seen me present, he's always on the question slides because I pay a bit of homage to a guy that really revolutionized my life. And yeah, so part of that was we started working together. We started looking at some of the hurdles. And we got to the point where we didn't have to get up at 3 in the morning. Every prod deploy was successful. And we were like, if only there was some name or word to describe what we were doing. And in 2012, we realized we were doing this thing called DevOps. The biggest problem, though, was people had opinions about what DevOps were. And so we would spend a lot of time arguing, which is quite rare in IT. You know, about the names and syntax and semantics of stuff. And so it was at that point I coined the phrase, the first rule of DevOps is never say the word DevOps. And to me, DevOps was about making stuff go. And so that's how I kind of sold it to development teams. I was like, I'm not going to even engage with you on whether or not this is DevOps. How about we just make stuff go? And then I chose words, continuous integration, continuous delivery, again, to make stuff go. And then over the years, it's just growing and people are getting on board and luckily have stopped arguing about it and just knuckle down and do it.
Wow.
How about you, Rob?
So many years ago when I was a junior DBA, my introduction to the job was open up Management Studio, connect to an instance, double click on SQL Activity Monitor, view history, and check that all of the jobs have succeeded for 200 instances.
That sounds really fascinating.
Wow, I had so much fun. And then somebody, I needed to organize my photos, and somebody told me about this thing called PowerShell, and I organized my photos, and that was cool. And I thought, I wonder if I can do this better. So I wrote a script to go to all 200 instances, check whether the last job status was succeeded or failed, and then color code an Excel sheet, red is bad, agreed is good. And then I could check all of those jobs in 2 minutes. I did have to do both alongside each other for a month to persuade my boss that what I was doing was a good thing. But that was my love of automation. And from then on, every time I really learned from a guy called, somebody Sansom. Can't remember his first name. John Sansom. Thank you very much, William. And he said, automate everything. No, I mean everything. So I set about automating all of these things. And then I changed jobs and I went to lead a team, and we had a very, 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 very manual waterfall approach to delivering changes. And the developer and myself were very much for changing this. So we fought, and I do mean fight, with the tool that was known as Release Manager, just as Microsoft brought it into TFS. And we had loads of fun and found lots of bugs and things trying to make this thing work, so that we could deploy our changes automatically. We persuaded the change team, and we persuaded the release team, and with the first change we had was a tiny little change, one to the website and one to the database. Oh, this is going to be brilliant. Went through, we pressed the button. We knew it would only take 5 minutes. We knew we had a rollback in place that would take 5 minutes. We had 15 minutes. We were allowed to do it in the middle of the day because, like Hamish said, he wants to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And 7 or 8 minutes later, just nothing. Logs have just stopped. So to cut a long story short, turns out that at 3 o'clock in the morning the night before, a developer had decided to fix a bug without telling anybody or putting it anywhere. And this caused the change of the website to call a store procedure and expect to get 1 result back. And when it got 2 results back, it said, no, I want 1 result back. I'll call the second store procedure, which also gave 2 results back. And it went into this little loop. And all 12 front-end web servers were at 100% CPU and completely unresponsive. So it was a good thing because it taught us that if we go through the process, we can make things work. And when we go outside the process, things go badly, badly wrong. And that's how I got into DevOps.
Wow. That's a very sad story, but with a happy ending.
But with a happy ending. Yeah,
with
a happy ending.
All right, well, I'm next. But before I start, Hamish, if you zoom out and you click next, it'll actually go to the bio slide. This is the PowerPoint Zoom feature. We'll see if it works, but I'll talk while we're trying to get this done. I actually got to DevOps sooner than I thought I had, and it's a little bit like this language difficulty. I used to think that DevOps was just basically like if you were a full-fledged developer and also doing full-time operations. Yeah, if you click next, it should zoom in and go to the panel slide. It should. We'll see. Maybe it won't.
No, that's I know that's what was getting me before. I was expecting to go to stuff.
I see it, just not going to stuff.
Yeah, this is DevOps in action. This is the first release. It's iterative.
Click next again. See what happens. We'll just keep going with that. So anyway, I used to think that you were only doing DevOps basically if you were like the staff of Stack Overflow. Like that was the only people who did DevOps. I just didn't get it. But later on, I figured out that I got into DevOps a long time ago. I worked at a small software startup and I landed in a team called the Build Operations team. And the mission of our team was to try to automate ourselves out of a job. My colleague Nate was basically like, yeah, this is our mission. We'll never actually achieve this mission because the more we automate, the more people are just going to ask us to do. Like there is no literal end that we are going to reach for removing manual tasks. And our whole job was just to try to improve the relationship between different sides of the org. Now, we still did. I mean, I do think just adding a team called the DevOps team into an organization and being like, we do DevOps now, that isn't really DevOps. But basically what our mission was in this team was to speed up the release process. Now, we didn't actually make it that fast. Like we were maybe not a high performer at DevOps, but essentially what we were doing was early on in the mission called DevOps, and it was an interesting time. I mean, later on, certain aspects of doing it for database code, I would say I kind of drug my heels and I wasn't on board with it earlier in my career. And my views on that have changed a lot in the last 12 years, basically. So it kind of evolved over time. But yeah, I think I got back into DevOps before I really understood that the term was broader than I thought it was. How about you, William?
Yeah, I've just been watching the Slack chat and the normal chat for this call, and I'm going to join with a few people in there who basically have said they're not convinced that they are in DevOps just yet.
Ah.
And that's how I felt for a long time too, which is similar to what Kendra's just said as well. DevOps is a very cool name for something that's been around for a long time, right? Trying to make things happen and trying to make sure the systems don't fall over and break the company. So similar again to Rob and Hamish, I've been a DBA for the last 15 years, and I don't like to get up in the middle of the night. I don't like to work on a weekend. Who does, right? Except for the overtime pay, which is nice. So I am the prototypical lazy IT guy. I try and find ways to make sure that I don't do these things over and over again. So automation is the key for that. And that is already then the start of DevOps. It's trying to make things happen so that my life is easier, but so that also I don't make mistakes over and over again. So I guess really DevOps have been doing it the whole time I've been in IT. Just only recently realized that that's what it is, just like you were saying, Kendra, that, you know, like Stack Overflow and the cool companies, they do all this cool stuff, but actually, no, they do the really boring stuff as well. It just sounds cool because it's a cool website, right? Same thing for everybody, I think. Our own stories always sound really boring compared to the stories of other people. And you tell your story and someone, at least one person in the room, like even if it's just your mom, is going to go, wow, that sounds really cool. So yeah, DevOps, been doing it, I guess then since forever. And now I'm consciously doing it.
Nice.
Yep.
I always say to people, you know, because people talk about the unicorn companies and all that. I'm like, look, you know, don't fret about what you perceive they're doing, because to me, a unicorn is just a donkey at a party wearing a party hat. Let's party.
Excellent. A unicorn is a donkey.
With a party hat.
In a party
With
hat.
a party hat.
I mean, I think that's really the thing, is it wants to party, and that's important.
Yeah.
It's the problem with donkeys. They don't always want to party. Now, if you hit next slide, I don't know if we're going to get to the slide I want, but we'll get somewhere, and we can start with our scenario. So the way this session is inspired by, there we go. This slide's fine. I can explain. This session is inspired by the Will It Blend series of YouTube videos. There is a company out there that makes a powerful blender, and what they like to do is put iPhones in it, tree branches in it, and they always ask the question, will it blend? So the question for each of these scenarios is, will it DevOps? Now, this is kind of shorthand for, can they be successful at database DevOps? And by successful, I really mean, this is a lot of shorthand, right? By successful, I mean, can they really remove all the manual steps from their deployment process? And will it be okay, given their particular problems? So there's 3 scenarios that are based on real world scenarios. They have been anonymized, and we'll talk about the details of the scenario. The panel can ask questions. You can also ask questions in Slack, like, what do you mean by X, Y, Z? We'll talk about that, and then we'll kind of vote. Will it DevOps? And, you know, you can say yes based on if they do. The question is, what do they need to do to be successful if they can be? Or you might just think they're doomed. You might just be like, no, it's not going to blend. It's just not going to blend, and they shouldn't even try. So there's a little bit of an optimist pessimist test. But if they can do it, the question is, well, what do they need to do to be successful? So that's the story. So our first example is an online learning management system. And if you go to the next slide, we have a few slides to learn about the company here. They're not a super huge company. They've currently got 3 development teams, and they're doing Agile and Scrum. And they talk about chickens and pirates around the board every morning. They have lots of Post-it notes on the wall, right? They're doing all the stuff. They've got Kanban boards, and they've just got one DBA who the IT team is in its own, structure of an org. It's a small company, but they've got one DBA. And then the DBA is not Joe. There's another person named Joe. The DBA is pretty new, actually, but Joe has been at the company for like years, and he knows everybody, knows everything. And Joe pretty much designed the whole production architecture. He knows how everything works, and when anything's gonna change, like if you're gonna bring in a new anything, a new SAN, a new piece of network equipment, if you're gonna change something major, you've got to go through Joe. So on the next slide, we have more info about how they currently release their changes. Right now, with app code, they've actually got it down pretty smooth. They are doing like every change that gets checked in kicks off a build, and automated tests run for the app code, and it gets deployed to lots of different environments and to production. They actually are really good with that. But for database changes, it's a little slower. They actually do have automated deployment of the database changes up through a staging environment, but everything has to be reviewed by Joe before it goes to production. And because they've just had instances in the past where the database code went bad, the developers are just not as comfortable with the database code. And now the new DBA is in there, and they're kind of like, they're supposed to review the code too. Now, a little bit about their environments on the next slide. They don't have a super huge environment. Their largest database is only 5 gigs. So these are actually pretty small production databases, but they have an unusual environment when it comes to the nature of activity. Their OLTP database that's customer facing behind the learner management system, there can be really high rates of activity. So thousands of batch requests per sec going on. And they have very high standards for these. If any of these queries are longer than 15 seconds, it's considered an emergency, and that's automatically detected from the application layer. So if queries are 15 seconds or longer, an error gets flagged, a ticket gets automatically generated, all hands on deck. And this is part of why all those database changes are gated for review, is because in the past we've had changes go out that have really tanked it and made the system slow. So any questions about their setup or what's going on there with this little team? Has anyone worked with Joe before?
Yeah.
When I read the book, The Phoenix Project, there's a character in The Phoenix Project who's like a single point of failure, and I was like, that's Joe.
Yeah. I was actually Joe years and years ago. I was the guy that was, all work sort of funneled through me, and it was, I liked it at first because I felt like a job security, but then I didn't have a very good work-life balance. Yeah.
Joe basically never takes vacation because he can't, because everything stops when Joe is out. Should we put the poll up now? The question for the audience is, will it DevOps? And if you're saying yes, it's not just like in its current state. If you're saying yes, you're like, basically, there's a few things they need to change, and then they can get, Joe does not have to be a single point of failure. And there is a plan to handle this that integrates with DevOps. But we've got to handle, how do we make sure we don't screw up database performance, basically. So we got to have a plan for that. Which, by the way, we don't seem to have a very great plan for right now, because Joe reviewing the code, I don't know if that's the greatest performance testing plan.
Yep.
Okay, so we're coming up to half of the people have voted.
Oh, nice.
So we'll give it another, 10, 15 seconds or so for you to get your vote in. It's not a difficult vote to make, so...
The panel doesn't get to vote in the quick poll, by the way. It doesn't let us, but we only get to vote verbally.
Can we get the yes, I will try and get the scenarios reposted into the Slack channel as well.
Somebody also just posted, all hail Joe.
All hail
All hail Joe.
Joe he's a really hard worker, but he just can't let go.
Okay, so we'll give it 10 seconds for the voting, and then we're going to close it.
We've got a question that just came in Slack. Does Joe give code review and training? So one of the sad things about Joe's life is that because Joe is in the center of everything, Joe's version of training people is basically explaining verbally everything he knows rapid fire.
You have described 2003, Hamish.
Okay, so I've closed the vote on the poll, and we have 55% people saying yes, this team can succeed. 23% say no, they can't, and 23% say they don't know.
Cool.
Joe is a tough. So how do we solve a problem like Maria or Joe?
Well,
Hamish, how did you stop? How did you stop? Or William, how have you stopped Hamish?
Well, the big question here is what happens to Joe, because he's going to get hit by a bus, or he's going to get sick, or he's going to go on holiday, or he's going to quit, right? Does the whole company fall down and everybody loses their job? Probably not. I've seen this case a few times, and Joe usually has an inflated self-importance inside the company, whether directly desired or by accident. And it's usually very difficult to combat because the institutional inertia, is that the right word? It's just there that to try and move Joe out of the way is difficult.
Yeah.
Without
Everybody in the company knows that Joe can do it. Hey Joe, how does this work? Hey Joe, will this work? Hey Joe, Joe, all of this process, can we just get something sorted?
Yep.
It's not easy.
Yeah. And Joe can do things faster than other people too, because he knows he has super user access on everything, and he knows exactly what to do, right?
Yeah. I always think it depends on the type of person that Joe is, because if you can persuade Joe that stepping back from some of that stuff and automating it, we were talking about automating ourselves out of a job, is a place where he or she is happy to go, then there's a chance this team can succeed at DevOps. If Joe is very much wants to hold on to it, and the management and the company want him to keep that knowledge, then it's going to be hard for them to be able to iteratively make changes.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of points been made in Slack here from Jeremy. Why doesn't Joe trust the code? What can help with that? Team trust and technical trust. Should Joe get involved earlier so he already knows what's coming before it gets there?
Yeah.
So it is a trust thing, right? And it will be both team and technical and institutional trust. Joe has probably saved the day a few times and does things that nobody else can. And like Hamish says, gets up in the middle of the night and fixes things because he knows where to look and how to fix it.
My Joe story kind of came out of survival. I was a team leader at the time, and I lost 40% of my staff because the company went through a mass redundancy. So for me, it was, hey, I've got to make the ship sail, keep sailing rather. And so there were times where I had to take on like a whole range of activities that other people used to do. How I got around it was I started, documenting what I did, standardizing things, and just collaborating with people within my team, because I was managing 40% less people, but still doing 100% of the work that we did. And so instead of having silos of knowledge within my team, because I was one and so were other guys, I had one guy that was the web app guy for deployments and configurations and stuff. And so I actually went on holiday. That's how I got around it, because I thought, you know what, I need a break. And during that holiday, I thought about why things were the way they were and started collaborating within my own team. And then over time, that extended out to the developers, because that code that we're talking about, yeah, we didn't understand what the developers are doing. They didn't understand the impedance that we were having when it came to deployment. And so I found, first of all, collaborating within my team, getting us on the same page, meant that I didn't have to be there. I empowered my staff like any good manager should. And yeah, I got to the point where I was not Joe, but my team was now Joe. And so again, I had to go to the pub with the head of development, and I said to him, I'm not leaving this pub until we are on the same page. So I bought him a lot of beer, and after 3 hours, like just talking back and forth as adults and now somewhat inebriated adults, we realized that we wanted the same thing. We wanted to deliver software to our clients. We just didn't know how to work with each other. And so I set up a desk in the dev team, and I said, can you show me what this agile thing is that you guys keep talking about? Because I understand waterfall. It's brilliant. And it's not brilliant. And so I started learning. I spent a day a week with the dev team. And then what I did was I brought that back to my team and told them, and we started slowly fusing together and getting on the same page, such that we were now a collective team. We had that common goal, and we started to look at why are we manually editing config files? Because that's the way we do it, because I don't trust anyone else. Well, how about, Rob, it's funny when you're talking about release manager and TFS. That's why we bought Octopus Deploy. Because at that time, 2012, back when we were doing this stuff, Octopus did one thing and one thing great. It deployed web apps for us. And it's like, oh my goodness, we don't have to do this. And we put trust in the machines. Best thing, Octopus Deploy and other things like TeamCity, Jenkins, whatever, were tools that enabled us to collaborate together so that it wasn't reliant on one person. And we still did code reviews, but it wasn't like what we were doing, like, stop, I will look at this. I will look over every single line because I don't trust you. And the only time I'm going to look at it is in prod. Yeah, nah.
So we've had a couple more comments in the Slack channel. And one of the comments has been, part of the problem with Joe is that Joe doesn't have a lot of time. So it's hard to move Joe to earlier in the process just right now. So get Joe out of the process and then try to get him adding value early in the process. And I kind of like that. I think, especially because in this scenario, we have a DBA, and the DBA probably should be more responsible for like looking forward and predicting performance problems than Joe. So the DBA, maybe the best way to deploy them is to say, okay, like just observe all of the comments Joe has, like right now, observe the current process and everything that like Joe is looking for, get that information out of him of what he's looking for, and then raise the question of, can we handle this in the automated testing that we're already doing? And maybe these are tests that are, all the queries are getting run through the app. So maybe we aren't testing the database code directly. Maybe we're running different app things, but work up that coverage issue. And if we do that for a little while, eventually we can just be like, all right, we're taking the training wheels off, Joe, you're kind of moving out of this process. And if we start noticing regressions, we'll revisit, why aren't we catching these? Are there insights he has that we haven't figured out yet? But get him out of it that way, and then maybe be able to get him earlier into the process for some of the bigger architectural stuff.
Yeah, well, that's the idea, right?
Part of the problem, Joe's really busy is part of the problem.
But Joe is the stated architect of the system, right? So as the architect, they should be taking a higher level approach anyway. They should be steering or giving guidance in where to steer to. Yeah. That's our goal. Come on, team, let's get there. That's what you have the ops side of the thing for, right? At least that's how I see it.
Yeah.
Kendra, was that worthy of a prize?
Which are you asking if William gets a prize?
William? No,
I get a prize.
I vote no.
I vote no on William. For Mikhail,
Oh yeah, no, I think that was absolutely worthy of a prize. Also, I would like to say that we do have someone in the Slack channel who has mentioned Joe's name from the Phoenix Project. Is Brent in the Phoenix Project is the character when I read that book, and I was like, that's Joe. Yeah, that is Brent, aka Joe. All right, should we do the next scenario? Should we dive in?
Yeah.
All right, The next scenario, this company is, what do they do? Oh, it's the startup, I think. Yes, the growing e-commerce company is next. And the growing e-commerce company has a lot of developers. They have 10 different dev teams, and each, dev team has 9 or 10 or 11 people on it. So there's like 100 developers, and 100 developers can actually generate a lot of change. There's a team of 8 DBAs, and they work together, and they have, an on-call rotation, and there is like a network on-call center. So, it's a big enough operation that there's pretty much good establishment of monitoring of production. When issues come up, they get escalated to the network on-call center or NOC, who can do triage steps, and then, app team issues get escalated to those, database issues get escalated to the DBA team. Now, on the next slide, we have more info about what they do. They, there we go. Like, it's coming up. The app, again, just like last time, they're actually doing pretty well at automation for application tier changes. They are able to do, for database changes, they do have builds they're using source control. Right, so they've already standardized a lot. They're using source control, and when they check in changes, they do have automated builds that kick off. They internally wrote their own tools to do a lot of these things. And for database changes, they basically have this command line app that when they're ready to get things to the staging environment and to the production environment, the automated install stops. And what they do is they hand a package to these teams. They've got a command line app so they can deploy the code there. So it's not like they're opening Management Studio, but they're still, when you deploy, you have to copy down the files. You've got to test out running the command line app, verify that it's successful, and that's only DBAs who deploy to staging. So there's this handoff point to the DBAs at staging, and then there's a change approval board. After something goes through staging, there's a big change approval board that meets. The DBAs have to defend the change, and then maybe it gets cleared for production based on like this whole board of leadership who may get in and ask a bunch of questions there that the DBAs don't know the answers to, so then they have to go back to the developers and ask questions. And so changes can kind of get cut off at the pass there by this board. On the next slide, we'll learn a little bit more about their environment. It can be a little bit challenging. They've got about 20 terabytes in each of the staging and production environments. This is across a variety of databases and instances, and around up to 3 terabytes each. So not the biggest in the world, but enough that when performance is slow, it can be clumsy. There's also SQL Server replication set up between a lot of these instances in the environment. And sometimes if you make a change to an upstream database and there's replication to like a downstream reporting system, sometimes a small change here can kick off a big impact in another part of the system that isn't expected. Also, the staging environment isn't on as good hardware and storage as production. So some of the regular processing jobs, it's normal for them to take up to 12 hours in staging. Like that's like actually baseline for that. The devs only have read access in staging, and they don't really know where anything is, right? Because that's sort of where the DBA's area begins. And only a few devs have read access in production, but it's pretty much gated off. So for app changes can flow through really well, but for data changes, there's really a line. And they do deploy changes often, but changes have a really high lead time. So for this group, the DBAs may be deploying, a change every day of the week, but that change may have been waiting for up to 3 months since it was handed off to the DBAs, right? Because it goes to the change board, it goes back, it goes back and forth, right? It takes a long time to test them. So, any questions about this group before we vote?
Yeah, so devs So question from the Slack channel: are the DBAs assigned to different dev teams?
Yes, they are. That is a great question, Steve. The DBAs sort of each have a area of specialization, and they also participate in an on-call. So the DBAs sort of have, like, if the devs have a question, they kind of have a DBA assigned they can go talk to, and the DBA sort of works with that group. But because of the on-call rotation, they sort of all know the environment as well.
So I had a question. You said that changes went through a process, through change process, and sometimes they went back and got changed.
Mm-hmm.
When they go back, do they go right back to the beginning of the process?
Not necessarily. Great question. I mean, it kind of depends on sometimes it's just something that needs clarification of like, oh, in your change request, you didn't mention whether or not this will impact blah, 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 that we've had an issue with in the past. And it's just, okay, we have to figure this out. But the problem is then you've got to wait a week to get approved again. So you may just have to change your change request, but it adds a week, and that's part of how this 3 months starts adding up. Because there might be a different change approver at the board next week who asks a different question.
Oh,
Anyone who's ever worked with a big change board, this is like, it's like a very slow merry-go-round.
Please don't let William be in the change board this week. Please don't let him be there. I've done that.
Yeah.
Well, there's another question in Slack here. Do the DBAs talk to each other?
They do. The DBAs talk to each other and are a very merry band of database administrators. I mean, slightly grumpy at times, but you know, all in good fun.
Come on.
Man.
They like yelling no a lot.
Correct. Okay, so is that the end of the question round? Then I'll launch the...
Could you just hold, because there are some questions coming through. People are typing in Slack, so just...
Oh, yeah, I can see too.
See if
I love how it's like people are typing.
People, people. There's
typing going on. What else?
Hey,
so,
Hamish, sorry, Kendra. I was going to ask Hamish how he dealt with change boards.
Funnily enough, I quite liked them, but I didn't like where they were in the process. Because finding stuff, having that at staging, in my opinion, was way too late. Because again, as Kendra described, you'd have to go right back, feed it through, and we were at situations where there was 3 months worth of code to release to prod. And, the old adage, well, it worked on my laptop. Well, it worked in UAT.
Yeah.
Go to prod or, through staging prod and boom. And suddenly, you've got a group of developers, DBA, ops, whatever, huddled around a laptop going, what happened? And looking at code from 3+ months ago. Look, mate, I mean, my opinion on change boards is that they are insurance for us, but you don't buy insurance as you see the smoke appearing underneath your house. I wish I thought that analogy through, but it kind of works.
I understand it.
Yeah, I just hope other people understand. You know me, how my brain works on tangents.
Okay,
Yep, go, William.
We've got a couple more things. So coming through Slack, is there a hierarchy to the DBAs, i.e. certain ones assigned to staging, then others review the staging changes for integration testing?
So the answer to that is there's only a little bit of hierarchy. Like the new person is always the one who's assigned to like rebuild the staging environment when it needs to be rebuilt as a sort of hazing.
Yeah, of course. Okay.
That's how you learn, right? Is you get hazed and you have to do it all yourself. But other than that, like the DBAs for each area handle the changes for that area because they've had most contact with that dev. There are some really busy areas that have more than one DBA, but they kind of more just trade off because that allows somebody to kind of be off working on a longer term task while someone else is handling the more short term stuff.
Okay.
I would assume in this one, by the way, I would say assume that you can have budget to do things, right? Like if you want to make a bunch of changes, assume that if you make an argument, you can get the budget, and also assume this is a startup. It's a pretty flexible organization. The management is open to changing things if you can prove it's going to work.
Okay, and a couple more now. Is the change supposed to be approved before development? Now, I'm assuming this is more like it's not just random development, but rather it's been pre-approved by the change board, maybe?
So the changes are only approved at the very end. So after they're all code complete and have completed successfully being deployed to dev, there is a QA environment and the staging as well. And there's sandboxes before dev. So actually they go through sandboxes, dev integration, QA, and then staging, and then the change approval happens after that.
Okay. And one final one before we throw on the poll. So they say this is going to be a weird question. I don't think it's a weird question. Do the devs who don't have access to read production have accurate representative data in their development environment? Or is all the data the junior devs see a guess of what he thinks is right?
Great. That is a great question. So the environments are different sample sizes. The dev integration environment is just a sample, a seeded sample of production-like data. So it is much smaller and query performance is much different in there. The staging environment is a copy of production data. It uses no masking to obscure any sensitive data, which maybe is a problem, but it's a full-size data set. And devs do have read-only access to that currently, which there's some problems there, but that's the way things are.
Okay, so we'll put up the poll now. So if you please take your time to answer the question whether you think this team can succeed at DevOps.
Yeah. Specifically for the database, they actually, for the app tier, they're actually got really great. I mean, they do have that change approval board in there for the app code too. It's not just the database changes, but it's the lag time for changes for the app tier is only like 2 days. Like they can get app changes out fast currently.
And you know what? This is so typical of what happens out there, and it happened for me. I mean, I cut my teeth on DevOps on application stuff because that was way easier, because let's be honest, it's just a DLL.
Yeah. Swap a web server in, swap a web server out.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah, it's easy as. But yeah, and it was always the database that was causing us the grief. But I think, you know, what I would say to people is you've got to start somewhere. You've got to get those quick, easy wins, because I've spoken to some people that speak Latin, and they said that Rome was not built in a day. You know, it took a wee bit longer. You got to get the aquifers right. And so start small, but achieve greatness, you know, because typically if you can get the application lag, you know, get that pipeline going, and then you look at, okay, what's the next step? You know, how can we do this? And again, it might be just folding some scripts into that process, but you know, again, doing small iterative changes with the goal of, you know, repeatable, reliable, automated deployments to your database layer.
One of the tricky things about this environment is that what looks like a really small change can have a big impact because of that replication and downstream processing, right? And that's what can make, I mean, there's multiple things that can make database changes hard, but I think that's one of them is in complex systems where there's a lot of data processing that happens. You know, what looks small might not be so small. But I personally don't think that's, I mean, I'm kind of giving away my vote, but I actually don't think that's impossible to solve. Now, how we solve it, I think is an interesting question.
Okay, so I'm going to close the polls now on this one, and we are at 73% think that yes, this team can succeed with the DevOps. 14% are at no, and another 14% at they don't know yet.
So for everyone who voted yes, I'm really curious to know what you think they should do to solve their problems without completely ticking off all those people on the change board, right? Because we can't just like cut them out of the process and then start causing a lot of problems. We can cut them out of the process if we succeed.
Oh, I can show the answer. Sorry, I didn't realize this. I can show the poll results. So there we go. There was one question that came in through the poll. Why is this a DBA problem at all? It's a team of it takes a team of devs to write the code in the same way that app devs write code, with tests. So I guess maybe not a question necessarily, but a statement, which, yeah, what do you all think?
Well, if we just suddenly said this is all the developer's responsibility and not the DBA's responsibility, what would happen if we just did that suddenly? The developers don't necessarily have all the knowledge the DBAs have about how production works. I mean, that's the tricky part about these situations, is all the experiential knowledge of the relationships in the system isn't something the developers know, and transferring the knowledge to them is really hard because the developers have a lot of other stuff to work on.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
And all you're going to do there is create informal silos. Yeah, it's not going to work.
No, that's true.
I mean, I think it does have to become a developer problem. It's just, how do we get from here to there, right? It has to become a shared problem from both groups, right? But like,
yes.
Right now it's so separate that looking at it, you're like, well, how do we not stop everything, but like move that to a more shared approach? I've thought about this one a lot, and I actually think that the key to the problem is the staging environment. And the fact that that's where the line is, right? Right now we have a line. And I think if we first do shared responsibility for the staging environment, that's like the first thing to tackle, because the staging environment is like production, and that's where there's a more safe area to have people on the dev side start to learn about when things get slow, what caused it.
Go on, Hamish.
No, you go, mate.
Okay, so in the Slack channel, there was 2 comments which they're pretty complementary to each other. Somebody saying it would be helpful if there's somebody maybe in the app dev team who has experience with a DevOps sort of style or with the agile sort of approach, and someone else saying, well, they should start off with a proof of concept just to prove basically what's happening. Maybe this is a point I was going to make as well. We've got multiple areas which are being looked after by dev teams and DBA teams. Have one of the smaller areas of the code itself go through the entire process to prove, look, we can make it work on the simple stuff and take small steps to make things happen. It's similar in a way to how people approach unit testing. They hear it and go, yeah, but we can't get unit testing coverage. It'll take years. And they think they need to get everything done before introducing it completely. And this isn't a big bang moment, right? You got to take small baby steps to get closer to a full coverage.
How do you eat an elephant?
Yes, one bite at a time. Correct.
One small slice at a time. I like the elephant carpaccio thing. So
yeah, that's right.
Like slices of the elephant. So now that you mention it, there is this one area of the system that, so you know how I mentioned there's all this replication? Well, the replication starts somewhere and it ends somewhere. So that end, the reporting servers actually consume a lot of data. But the nice thing about the reporting servers is they're behind like a VPN, and you can put a set in and take a set out. And that would actually be a really good area for a proof of concept, because if you mess up the reporting servers, you actually can take them out of the VIP and take them out of rotation. And so you can have a little bit of experimenting, and there's like nothing downstream from that. So changing the data in there isn't going to mess up process. So that actually would be a good area for a proof of concept, even though it's not the smallest data in the system. It's the most isolated in a way, because it's at the far end of the diagram. So that proof of concept could help.
Yep.
Someone asks if they have the automated integration and performance testing. They do have automated builds, but in terms of performance testing, it's a little bit tricky because they only have those full-size data sets in staging, and they have enough like link servers and replication that just running like replay against those doesn't work really well. So there's some forms of performance testing in terms of like they can introduce fake changes into the system and then see how long processing takes, but it's not perfectly production-like. It's just sort of similar. So it's ish. I think that that would help though in terms of the performance testing. I actually think monitoring that staging environment and making the developers sort of responsible, like get the developers to help because there's more developers. So we need to establish a baseline of performance in that environment. And if some of the stuff is just too slow, we should just fix it, right? Because we need to get stuff through there. But then establish a baseline so that people can deploy a change to there and then know, did it impact something? Because right now they have no way of knowing. There's just sort of the DBAs who can check, right? Yeah. But that could all be automated and the developers could help do that, which then I think you could at that point get rid of manual deployment to that environment. As long as people can see what impact did it have, which right now they really don't have. How to get rid of the cab, I don't know. That's like a negotiation of itself. But maybe I think the proof of concept might be a way through.
But certainly when it comes to cabs, you can, with some cabs, change management, release management people, you can, if you can show them that the build and release tooling that you're using, whether it's Azure DevOps, whether it's TeamCity, whether it's Octopus Deploy, has the capability for a person in that role to be able to be the one that goes, yes, absolutely, we've got some control. Mm-hmm. And you can maneuver that forward so that, yeah, okay, the change board need to agree that this change can go forward before it gets deployed. Excellent. Right. So as soon as 4 of the 6 of you press this button, it will be deployed. Yeah. And your safety as a change board is that it will be deployed in exactly the same way as it was deployed through all of the other environments, yeah, and all of the previous times it's been deployed, we have deployed to that system. So right, you can start to build the confidence with those people that actually, yes, yeah, there are less deployment failures and rollbacks because it's not a team of people doing it at 3 o'clock in the morning, and B, computers are really good at doing the same thing again and again and again. Yeah. But you can have some approval gates, then they can help to have that conversation. Certainly in some places I've been.
Yeah. And same deal. I mean, how often is those cab meeting things the first time they've ever seen what's about to go into production? So they're already on edge. They're like, mm-hmm, I need to understand this. I need to collaborate with other people about what this change is going to do to our system. Yeah, so that's why it's such an unwieldy, horrible situation, because it's the first time they've seen it. Where if you can show through that whole deployment process, we're doing this one thing, we've done it 10 times, it works, prod's going to be the most boring deploy ever. Those CAB meetings, they're just a tick of an approval. Yeah, I see. There's all the release notes, there's everything encapsulated with the package that we're putting out. It's a tick of the box. Or, right, you know what I mean? Yeah. They still have a place, but not this death by committee.
Yeah. I've seen it over time that certain companies have introduced a full clean pipeline that's automated, that effectively the cab dies. If at some point just say, why are we wasting our time doing this? We don't need to sit in a meeting every week for 2 hours ticking boxes that were already pre-ticked for us. So yeah, it's the whole thing, like Rob said, get more confidence in your deployment strategy and pipeline. There are less errors. You've already caught all the possible errors. Then there's no need to have the committee putting a rubber stamp on something.
I do think there's a role in a situation like this for some sort of flow control, but it's really for changes where we know we have to slow something down. So when we have many terabytes of data, occasionally we are going to have to do a change where there's going to be a side effect. Either we have to change enough data that we're just going to be impacting storage performance, or you know what I mean? We haven't, we have to have an outage of some sort. And for things like that, where we know there's going to be an impact, I think it does make sense to have like a traffic coordinator, because you don't necessarily want to be doing that on 4 different databases at the same time that are all using the same SAN, right? Like,
or doing it at the same.
Oh, go ahead.
Doing it at the same time as the DNS team are making some changes, or the network team, which could really mess with you in the middle of doing your updates.
Right. Yeah. So for database changes, I do think that sometimes there is a role, or there needs to be a way for kind of flagging changes that are going to have an impact, so that we can spread them out thoughtfully. But that doesn't have to be a cab. That might be another function that it happens differently.
And cabs hopefully evolve into something far more collaborative.
Yeah.
And that's what I've found. I talked about the death by committee thing, and gone were the days of those horrible meetings, because again, everyone knew the workflow was visible. We knew exactly what change was going through. So the amount of ticks required decreased, because it was more just a FYI than a, well, you can't pass go without my approval. Look at
so, a couple more points been made in the Slack channel. Actually, a fantastic point from Mikkel, saying basically it boils down to trust again. As soon as the trust grows, then all these obstacles get moved out of the way. He says here that he used to work at a company where they had a physical token for live DB access. Basically, like when you're going to the bathroom at a gas station and you need to get the key with a big weight on it. That's what it sounds like in the description anyways. And basically, they push towards making small changes in the database. So stepping more towards the agile thing.
Yeah.
So small changes means there's less chance of, or less risk, less chance of things breaking. So deployments happen better. So the quality gets risen higher and higher. People relax. And now he's saying this, this bathroom key scenario is long forgotten at that company. So basically, small steps, automated, and everybody's happy.
Yeah.
Go DevOps.
Small steps, and then also change ordering. So if we have to do a database change and an application change together, we figure out how to stage the database change first so it can go in. Don't have anybody using it yet, do all sort, and then later on we actually turn on, do the app change that actually cares about it, so that we aren't like in a situation where we have the app change in and the database change is not out yet, or it's not working right, and we have customers seeing it. So change ordering helps too. Sometimes. Sometimes it's hard. The replication piece, I actually, I think is an interesting one, because one of the things that separates often DBAs from developers is that developers have stayed as far as from replication as they can, and the DBAs are the only ones who understand it, right? Because nobody wants to work with replication.
No, the DBAs don't.
Right.
That's why we didn't mention it. We hoped you'd forget and we'd move on.
Convincing the developers to care about replication and to actually use it in all of their environments, I think, is one of the hardest parts of this scenario. No one wants to work with replication.
Correct. It would be someone absolutely insane who understands it and is good at it.
Yeah,
I think
Isn't that right, William?
It might be worth bribes in this scenario, is to actually bribe a few developers to pretend like they like replication and like try to spread it amongst the teams. No, it's really interesting.
Just try and find another solution instead of replication. That way is a way of pain and sadness. It's the Mordor of features inside SQL Server.
Sometimes, though, it's like replacing a rat problem with a weasel problem, though. I mean, you've just got to be careful what you replace it with.
Yeah.
All right, we have one more scenario. We're doing? Okay, we have 25 minutes left. Is that how we're doing on time?
Yep.
All right. We're right on time. What is our third scenario? Oh, our third scenario is the little team inside the corporate giant. The little team who could, but boy, do they have a lot of process to work with. So the little team inside a corporate environment, there are 7 developers, and they do not have a DBA, but they have hired a consultant to kind of help DBA-ify them and teach them database consulting skills. You probably can't imagine who I was in this anonymized scenario, can you? It's really hard to figure out. We will learn more about them on the next slide.
You weren't the one.
All my former clients. All my former clients are now like, is it me? So they don't have, so the good news is there's no replication involved in this problem. They have one critical database, and for their app changes, the second bullet's actually for their app changes. They have a pretty good flow that goes all the way to staging for their app changes. They do manually deploy the app changes, but it's not a big pain point. Now, they also have a cab, and they have a rule from the corporate cab that they can only deploy to production once every several months. But so at the bottom, they can sneak things through. So lower risk changes, so they have a huge requirement to have performance be fast. So they can do some index creation things and some plan guides. Who likes plan guides? Nobody likes plan guides, but they can do that without cab approval if they have to. Now, when they deploy database changes, what they get is they get scripts attached to TFS tickets. That's a lovely detail, isn't it? So production downtime is an extremely big deal. Oddly enough, people from outside the company can't see the downtime, but it causes this political firestorm inside the company. And so this machine never gets patched that the production database is on. There's no high availability for it. It's 400 gigs, so it's not tiny, but it's not the biggest database in the world. And there is just a very high rate of processing that goes against this instance, including lots and lots of inserts and data modification. I think this may be the last slide for these guys. I forget so that's the info we have. Do you have questions about this team? And can they DevOps even if they're only allowed to deploy to production every 3 months? Which this is something people struggle with, right? People have this question of, can I do DevOps this way, or do I have to change? What do I have to change?
Well, just because it's once every few months doesn't stop you from making an automated process, right? You can still DevOps it. We're not saying with DevOps that it has to be daily releases.
That's true. Should we do the poll?
Well, it's the deployment scripts derived from source and attached to TFS tickets and manual deployments. It's to take those things away. Surely
it's
those
okay because they only release once every few months, so they have plenty of time to completely redesign the process before the next release happens.
It's true. Except of course, what happens after each release is there is inevitably a lot of cleanup that stretches out for the next couple of weeks, sometimes a month.
You still got plenty of time. Quarterly releases, that's pretty awesome.
So we have a question. The change size gets way too big at 3 months, right? It is, but they have a lot of changes to release when they finally can release. And yeah, it is a heck of, so when something goes wrong, figuring out what caused it, very complicated.
Sure. So there's an interesting question just above. I'm going to turn it into a question. It's DevOps should deploy changes as often as possible. Discuss.
Let's go ahead and do the vote and see how optimistic people are. Because I have a comment about that one, but I kind of don't want to do it before the vote. So this team, the little, the nimble little team inside the corporate giant, can they do it? We had a question. How big is the critical DB? It's 400 gigs. There you go. Oh, yeah. So it's not tiny. Data comes in, not a lot of data goes out, so it is growing. I'm reading comments in Slack. So I'm going to go ahead and say my comments on the release every 3 months thing. There's an interesting piece in the State of DevOps report for 2018, where one of the groups they actually look at closely, this is the report by Dr. Nicole Forsgren and Jean Kim and Jez Humble. And they look at these groups who only deploy occasionally. Essentially what they're doing is DevOps, but they're shoehorning it into sort of a waterfall release schedule. And what they find is that, like this little team, their recovery time from the changes is like a month after them. And they find that these groups don't have the quality metrics that a lot of what they quantify as high performers in DevOps do. So in other words, a lot of the benefits that you'll get from DevOps of being able to detect flaws quickly and generally finding flaws before they get to production, you don't get those benefits as much when you are forced to release infrequently, or maybe not forced, but when you release to production every few months, essentially, or less frequently. So they have found patterns in their data. Micah says, unfortunately, I have to go help somebody with replication. We're all rooting for you, but we're not helping you. I'm sorry. Everybody's saying good luck.
He needs it. It's replication.
Better you than us. Sorry.
Okay, so we're just about half of the people have placed their votes on this last scenario. So looks like voter apathy is setting in towards the end of this. We give it another 20 seconds, then that's 3 minutes of voting time. That's more than enough for everybody, I think, right?
I keep trying to vote and it won't let me vote because I'm a panelist. Someone vote no for me.
No? You think no?
This is actually the group I have the hardest time finding the successful path for because the politics is so hard, you know? Just that the change approval board is the hardest one to break through because in that environment where, you know, it's like you must do it this way at a very high corporate level, it's very hard to do it without a champion at that level. So one of the things I would try to do would be to try to find champions at higher levels of leadership, you know, directors of various organizations who do want to release more often, and try to get them to influence higher up in the organization to release more often. Because yeah, there, like you said, there are things like the attachment to the TFS tickets, like we can change those, but one of the things that I think is really important to change is to deploy more frequently, and that's going to take political leverage that's really hard to get.
Yeah. Definitely.
I mean, you can get it, but you can't get it. It just takes a lot of trying to find the right people to help at the company. It takes a lot of networking.
So, last poll, we can see 56% think that we can get some DevOps going here. 33%, well, let's add some more percents there for Kendra's voice as well, is a no. And there's still a few people who are not too sure. I think, yes, you can. I'm quite sure you can get DevOps working everywhere. It's going to be varying degrees of DevOps, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, Kendra, to try and break the politics is the really difficult thing. But I think if you can fix the pipeline up to there, because as you've described, there is basically no development pipeline, no deployment pipeline that you could really say is robust or reusable or nice in any way. But if you built that, at least you would prove the tech part that helps the process work. And even if you stay at once every quarter that you're releasing, at least you have a deployment strategy. A ticket in TFS with a bit of code, oh my God, that's almost as bad as using SourceSafe, which I still see companies use nowadays.
It's better than a file share or nothing at all.
Yeah,
exactly. But
that's really all you can say about it.
Yeah, and it's so true. I mean, there are varying degrees of DevOps that you can achieve. And I always think, what can we do that's better than the status quo? And sometimes you have to try and find time to actually look at what you're doing. And this sort of situation reminds me of one of the biggest challenges that people have with actually implementing the processes associated with DevOps. And it comes down to culture. And that's one of the big things with this scenario. You're going to have to work on the culture far more than writing lines of brilliant code in your release pipeline, because technical people, we love tools. We're all about the tooling, but to make a process work, the people have to understand the culture, and you have to all be on board. And that really is the hurdle to a situation like this one.
Yeah. Well, so I am getting a little more optimistic now that we're talking about it. So who is gonna want a culture change? Well, whoever is asking this team for features is gonna want them to come out more frequently, right? Like the people who are like, hey, we want you to add functionality, like they don't want to wait 3 months for it. So finding those people and getting them to champion the idea of, we would like faster time to market. That's a start, because those are the people who are gonna really support, and find people in their leadership chain who will advocate for an experiment, because it is, I think, going to be an experiment, and that's sort of you're into changing the culture. So looking to the customers and their representatives is a good start for that change.
It is, and it's a good place to start, and how you bolster that. So when I wanted to buy some tools, I actually wanted to buy Octopus Deploy, and I went to management and I said, look, I can cut time and lieu by 75% if we automate our releases. And that way I got management on board. I already had, the client wanted really stable quality, stable deploys of quality. And so I had the client on board. I got management on board because I talked about dollars and cents. I got the people on board because I bought them lunch. I said, can we, if I buy you lunch, will you come and play with me at lunchtime? And I want, oh my goodness. I mean, work with software at lunch, and, just, I've got this idea, this other guy's got this idea, and this is how we're going to do it. And that's how you do it. By the way, cutting time and lieu by 75% absolutely failed.
What is time and lieu for? I don't know what that means. Overtime.
So basically time off after the fact.
Yeah, because I had staff who were up at 3 in the morning till probably about 6 or 7 in the morning because the deploys were horrible. And so then they had to sleep. And so I might see them around 1 p.m. But because I was a fantastic caring manager, I would then say to them, hey, Rob, Kendra, I know you guys were up during the night. Go spend time with your family next week, take some time off, take whatever. And I used to times it by 1.5 or twice because I wanted a team that loved me and would do stuff for me at 3 in the morning. But that wasn't the case, right? So yeah, it was a win, but we were always reactive, and I lost my members of staff during the day when we were doing productive work. So yeah, like I say, I failed. I did not achieve 75% reduction in time and lieu. I achieved 100%. People were not up during the night.
Nice.
Yeah. Management loved it, and it meant that we could start building it out, right? And building it across teams, because here's the thing. Some other teams noticed what we were doing, and they were like, we want some of that. So it was like, well, we use source control, we use continuous integration, continuous delivery, and we started building heartbeats and monitoring stuff so that the whole way through, we didn't do that overnight. It took months, but we got there and it just grew. But again, it came down to the culture. The culture was the biggest aspect. Anyone can write lines of code.
Yeah. So somebody
not anyone. I've proven that one.
Yeah, that's why we love it.
Close.
From Slack, somebody came in and said they wish they used Octopus more in their company. A quick response I made there, but I think has been basically said already on the call, is to not focus on the tech, focus on the business side, on the process.
Process.
The manager, the CEO, CTO, they don't really care about the tech. They care about the company making millions or whatever, right? They don't care how you manage. If that means you've got to manually copy code around, fine. If you can reduce time in lieu, like Hamish has done, then that is the sound of music to them, right? That's the money that they can see the company saving. And they really don't care about the tech. You know, even like for us, okay, this is PaaS. We like SQL Server. They don't care if you use SQL Server. They want their money to be in their bank accounts. If you manage that with SQL Server, Oracle, whatever, it doesn't matter. Same thing here. Focus on the business need. And as Kendra said, this is a phrase I use a lot more now after speaking with Kendra recently, was time to market. And especially in the startup scenario we just had, time to market is the most important thing for a company. They don't care what tech is used. They want to start selling their products yesterday.
Yeah. More and more large companies are starting to worry about that too, because these little companies can pop up and quickly release things and then iterate and improve and get a lot of excitement. So even in very established industries like banking, there's these disruptive little companies coming up that larger companies are starting to realize we need to be able to react faster, or we will be losing money because we will lose customers. I mean, it's happening in insurance. And so one nice thing is that if you do want to do less manual work, this is to your advantage. So look for people in your industry vertical who are talking about doing these things, because knowing, hey, other companies are doing this thing that I want to be doing, that's great information for you to talk to people like your customers about. Hey, have you heard about the fact that competitor is doing this style of thing, which coincidentally is what I would want to do. That's not going to hurt.
That's another comment in the Slack channel along that same lines. Sometimes a loss of staff, uptime, or productivity is a compelling argument for changing culture. So similarly to seeing if a competitor is out developing you, same thing here. I guess which also goes all the way back to the first scenario with Joe. Lose Joe, what are you going to do? Completely change everything because Joe's not there anymore. It's got to hurt for you to fix a problem, right?
I like to talk about Joe winning the lottery, by the way, instead of Joe getting hit by the bus. Like a lot of people in the US use the hit by a bus analogy, but I think it was Brent Ozar who suggested, he was like, what about if Joe won the lottery? And I'm like, that is a nicer outcome for Joe. I don't think he would work here anymore. He would just go enjoy his winnings.
Yeah.
But yeah, what if Joe wins the lottery? All right, we have 7 minutes left. Do you guys have closing slides that we do in the last 7 minutes? How does the last 7 minutes of the virtual chapter go? Is there a ritual?
There's no ritual yet.
Walk away quickly.
Yeah.
Leave the call open.
Out. No, I have two slides at the end. Yeah.
Well, we've got 6 minutes, so I think we should look at your 2 slides. Do you have a next meeting planned?
We do, yes, but we haven't quite got the date sorted with our speaker yet.
Still a surprise.
Yeah, it's like so close.
The cool thing is, and I haven't actually told Rob, so why not just tell him in front of the internet? I have our February speaker sorted as well. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Rob,
That's
cool.
Cool.
Are the lights on your beard off? We have we have a question from the audience. There we go.
The battery, after a while, it just sort of gives in and goes, "Whoa." So it needs a little rest, and then it comes back again. So this was particularly for SQL Saturday Slovenia. because Ljubljana in December is a magical place to be, because they have Christmas lights better than anybody else's Christmas lights you've ever seen. And so there's a tradition of me decorating the beard in a Christmas fashion. So I thought this year that Christmas lights were appropriate, especially as I've been banned from using glitter.
Oh, there's a question from Andrew. So I talked in a seminar recently about a cheat sheet I was writing for translating management speak. Is that still planned? It is still planned, but it doesn't exist yet. I was actually hoping to have it by this Friday. I don't know how, but I ended up doing 3 webcasts this week. But this Friday, yeah, I know, right? This is 2 out of 3. This Friday, I'm speaking at Group Buy. So for all of you attending who want another free event this week, there's a whole free day of training. That's the Group Buy online conference. So you will enjoy it or your money back. And I hope to have that cheat sheet ready for my talk then, but we'll see. We'll see. Because I want to add art to it. I should just ship it regardless. It'll have scribbles with it. But yeah, I'm working on that.
Cool. Closing comments.
So we do have a survey to put up at the end, which hopefully will come up. And one of the things we want to know is, what do you want us to show in 2019?
Oh.
What subjects, which speakers,
Yeah.
all of those things. So
do you want demos? Do you want concept stuff? Do you want both?
Yep, all of those things. So please just take a couple of minutes and answer that survey at the end of the webinar. That would be really, really useful for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does it come up after we close it? Is that what happens?
I am hoping that is what happens.
If it doesn't turn up, hit us up on Twitter or email, because it's really important to both Rob and I and Gary that we're your servants and leaders.
Yes.
We're here to make this an enjoyable virtual group for you to learn, connect, and share. So yeah.
That came out very naturally, Hamish, as if you'd made it up yourself.
Yeah, I just off the top of my head.
So
I feel like I want to learn the sign language for Learn, Connect, and Share, so that I can dance along every time someone says it.
Hey, do you know what? I've just realized for potentially the March group session, we may all be in the same city.
What?
Yeah.
You guys vacationing in March?
What's
happening in March?
Everybody
MVP Summit. We'll be in Redmond.
March, that's right.
I know, right? Yeah. That was excited Hamish voice. I try not to have that one too often. Mainly because of choir boys. But yeah, we should definitely this for me, it has been absolutely fantastic having you on, Kendra, and you on as well, William. This has been awesome. I love Kendra, the fact that you have about as much energy as me, but yours is way more appropriate. And William, your astuteness and ability to look like one of the best comedians in the world is just fantastic, man.
It comes naturally.
So yes, thank you very much. I am going to say now is the time to say goodbye, much as I don't want to. I'm going to close the webcast, and please do the survey. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All righty. Thank you very much. See you later. Bye.